Hello, I'm Regina Mccann, Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, we are going to talk about 10 things you should know about applying for financial aid. So I'm talking to all my college parents and my incoming college parents, and oh boy, you're in for fun. I've been through this once myself. It's a lot of paperwork, and so we want to get some information out to you because guess what? We're talking about financial aid, and the financial aid season has opened recently. They opened the lines for you to start inputting your information. So it's a great time to just kind of either teach you about it for the first time or just give you a little refresher. If we can help you learn a little bit more about the financial aid process, it maybe is a little bit key in making school more affordable for many people. Now, in July 2019, Sally Mae did a report on how America pays for college. And they said that the previous year, 40% of families did not apply for financial aid because they thought they wouldn't qualify for any. And 29% didn't know about it or missed the deadline. So those are some, pretty big numbers. So we want you to avoid making that same mistake. So hopefully these 10 important points will help you avoid missing out on some potential funds for school. And the first one is, because I was going to use the term, but I'm like, all right, the first place we have to start is, what is FAFSA? And if this is your first foray into the world of college education, you're probably seeing FAFSA for the first time, and it's all over the place as you're looking at all these colleges. So FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And that is the form that both prospective and current college students complete each year in order for their college and state of residence to determine how much aid they are eligible for. Many people talk about this as you're applying for to get into the school when you're going to the tours, and if they're doing info sessions in person or even virtual, they're talking about this. Make sure you fill it out because that feeds them the information that they need. So number 2, where do I start? Well, you can apply online. It's fafsa.gov. That's the site. Pretty easy, right? You will need your social security number or alien registration number if you're not a U.S. citizen. You're also going to need your federal tax returns for both you and your child if they worked. Your W-2s, your investment statements, records of any untaxed income, and of course, some bank records. Now, remember, both students and parents will be asked to create one of these FSA IDs in order to apply. So you want to make sure you tuck that away somewhere and, know and communicate with each other about what you're doing and, complete everything that you need to complete. Number 3, fill out your FAFSA sooner rather than later. And guess what? I already mentioned the season has just started. So now's the time to start your application, because here's what happens. You start it, you stop it. You start it, you stop it, because you get in there and you're like, oh crap, I need all this information, right? So you go back and forth a couple of times, but you really want to make sure you get this done sooner rather than later, because, you want to be able to, when you receive those, hey, your kid got into our school, you want to be able to get those packages that say, and here's what we can offer in financial aid for your child. So it's really important to get these done sooner rather than later. So when you apply can make a big difference in the amount of aid you're offered as well, because some financial aid is limited and is awarded to students on first come, first served basis. So again, another reason to get this done early. Now, you very likely may still be offered aid of some sort, but waiting longer may result in being offered fewer grants and more loans. And here's the difference. Grant is something that doesn't need to be paid back. We like to refer to that as free money. And then loans are something that you or the child would have to pay back, depending on how the financial aid package comes back, whether it's the child taking the loan, then they owe the money back, or if it's the parent taking the loan. And I will probably do another video on the different types of college loans, because parents do need to be aware of what they're getting themselves into. And the other thing that I'm finding is that a lot of the parents, we talk about these kids coming out with these huge student loans, but I'm seeing a huge uptick in parents taking on a huge amount of college debt. And I'm not talking $20,000, $40,000. I'm talking six-figure type of loans for their kids. So this could definitely be a part two at some point. Number 4, know your aid. Now, there's two kinds of aid that your student might be eligible for. There's need-based and merit-based. And need-based aid is calculated by FAFSA and your family's ability to pay for college. It typically is represented as federal student loans, federal grants, and on-campus work-study programs. Now, merit-based is usually awarded as a scholarship and is done through a college or a private institution for outstanding academic or athletic abilities. Now, I don't know if this is a huge trend or this is just a little small section of the schools that I was looking at, but I will say I looked at schools last year. I have a son who's now a freshman in college, and now I have a senior in high school. So we're going through it all over again. Yay. But I am noticing that there are a lot of schools who are saying, that they are focusing on need-based aid versus merit-based aid. And some of those schools are actually making a commitment to make college affordable for these kids, especially, if they would have a hard time achieving, going to that school because of their lack of assets or lack of income. So look for those types of schools. If you're in that situation, some of them are saying, hey, we want you to come here and we're going to do it need-based. So I found that actually pretty cool for some of those schools to do that. And, what are they doing? They're using some of their endowments probably, right? But it's definitely a trend, at least that I saw. Again, I don't know if that was just the small spattering of schools I was looking at, or if it's a little bit more widespread. So definitely something to consider. Number 5, financial aid can coexist with a 529. Now, 529s are a great way to start saving for college, and they are considered an asset under the federal aid formula, but they usually impact a little bit less than most people think on your eligibility for financial aid. So 529 accounts that are owned by parents or students could impact aid up to about 5.64%, which is, kind of a small amount when you consider all the other benefits of a 529. Now, generally, grandparent-owned 529s could impact aid up to 50%. However, quote unquote, however, the U.S. Department of Education has announced that full implementation of FAFSA changes originally scheduled for the academic year of 2023 to 2024 will be delayed until 2024 to 2025 school year. And Columbia Threadneedle did an investment blog on this back in July of 2021, and they discussed the new FAFSA changes and reported that big changes to the FAFSA program process means grandparents can finally help pay for college without worrying about the financial aid trap. Now, because of pending changes to the free application for student aid, which is again that FAFSA, students will no longer have to disclose that cash support that was coming from the grandparents. Now, that means effective for the 2024 and 2025 school year, grandparent-owned 529 accounts will no longer impact the student's eligibility to receive need-based financial aid. That is music to grandparents' ears and the parents' ears, because that is a big help and a big win for students looking for financial aid. But again, that's not going to impact us for this upcoming school year. What will that be, 2022 to 2023? Because we're applying for next year. But it is something to think about. In that case, if you do have a grandparent-owned 529, Maybe you don't have them, help you pay that tuition for next school year. Maybe you wait to the 2024 school year, and that way you don't have to account for any of that. So that's kind of a cool little change that's coming to us very soon. Okay, number 6, how family can impact aid. Oh, okay. Well, so you have a lot of changes in life, right? Life doesn't just stay, status quo. So you do have situations where you have some divorced families, and your student's FAFSA is based solely on the income of the parent the student lives with the majority of the time, which we call the custodial parent. So now if you applied last year, so if you're a recurring college student or a recurring college parent, last year you were married, the last year when you applied, you were married now, and then you had to have all that information from you and your then spouse. This year, you would only have the information for you. So that actually could help increase your financial aid need. It just depends on, what it looks like. But here's a big but, if the custodial parent has remarried, their new spouse's income is also factored into the FAFSA. So even if the spouse has no intention of contributing to a child's college cost, their numbers come into play. So, you may want to think about that if you have kids in college. I know this is a crazy thought, but financially for student loans and student financial aid, maybe you kick that can down the line a little bit. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but it does definitely, if you get remarried, your new spouse's income definitely comes into FAFSA. Okay, number 7, timing and arrival of aid. So now if you fill that form out, the FAFSA, as soon as filing opens, which remember, I just said it's open, it just opened, you should begin receiving financial aid award letters in a couple months, like think the, early spring, late winter type of thing. And they'll come from each of the universities that have accepted your students. And now these letters will detail what you're being offered from each school. And then you can make a more informed decision before your student makes any decision about which school to attend. So if you have like 4 or 5 schools and, you have one that you really like and another one that you really like, and there's, a substantial difference in the financial aid package, that may help, sway that decision a little bit. So that's a tough one though, because you want to see your kids happy, but you also have to think about, what's it going to cost you on the other side of it. Number 8, appealing your financial aid offer. So appealing a financial aid offer isn't like, saying, hey, I want to get a better deal and, let's talk about this. That kind of really doesn't work too much. It's actually more for families who have a change of circumstances, like a legitimate financial reason. They lost their job, they got divorced, they were part of that hurricane that came through a couple months ago. They had a death of a parent. So this basically is them, requesting a second look at their package offer. And it's really professional judgment of the school and the financial aid office of that school. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll definitely change anything, but they will look at it and hopefully look at it objectively. And, it doesn't hurt to try, especially if you're in that situation. You definitely want to at least approach the conversation. So don't overlook this option, especially if you've had one of those, major life change or major financial change, because that could impact your ability to pay for school. Number 9, don't let sticker shock deter you. Now, just as you shouldn't assume that you won't be awarded any money after you file your FAFSA, don't assume that, a dream school, even though it's really, really pricey, is out of the question. So some of the private universities and pricier colleges may be more generous with the amount of aid offered. So if you're interested in one of those schools that may be out of your price range, wait till you see that financial aid letter before making a decision. And again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that some of these schools have switched to a more focus on need-based aid versus merit-based aid, and they want to get these kids to their school. So, don't give up hope yet. All right. So keep looking for those financial aid packages. Okay, so number 10, there is this thing called a CSS profile. Hey, wait a minute, I just did the FAFSA. Why are you talking about another form? Aren't I done? Maybe, maybe not, just depends. The CSS profile is called the College Scholarship Service Profile. And that's one other form that you may need to fill in addition to the FAFSA. And predominantly, this is going to be more for your private colleges and universities and your Ivy Leagues. Most of the state schools may not require this. They may just go according to the FAFSA, but there are other schools who will definitely require this. So the CSS profile can give students access to non-federal scholarships and additional institutional aid. So now this form is available in early October, and the deadlines vary by the school. So you really want to go on their website and look for financial aid section and see what the deadlines are for your schools. Every school may be different. Now, the students should expect to pay a fee for each school that they are sending a CSS profile to. Oh, fun. That's just what we want, pay more fees. Each year, college education gets a little bit more expensive. And we all know that. We are in sticker shock when we look at some of these schools. Like, we're looking at them like, oh, how cool. It's a great school. It looks beautiful. The campus is gorgeous, blah, 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 blah. And then we look at the cost of the school and we're like, holy crap. So yeah, there is definitely sticker shock on these schools. So you do want to consider the places you're applying, the aid offer in your financial aid letters, and what that may look like across the 4 years before making your decision. Now, be sure not to overlook deadlines across the board. It's really, really important to get those packages in as quickly as possible. And not only the parents, but the students have to keep in mind those deadlines too, because they may have to fill something out. Now, doesn't mean you can't help them, right? I'm definitely helping my kids. So just be aware that that is out there. Now, remember, funds are limited and the deadlines are typically pretty strict. So apply sooner rather than later. And just, have a solid plan. Think about, all right, here's how we're going to attack this. All right, right now, my kid's working on his essays, right? That's his job or her job, right? Working on those college essays and buttoning up that student enrollment application. And meanwhile, you can start the financial aid applications. And then, between the two of you, you can get to the finish line. And hopefully you'll get some great letters in the mail in a couple months. But definitely compare and contrast what you're offered. And good luck. We're all keeping our fingers crossed. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me. Again, I'm Regina Mccann Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management. You can find me at forgewealth.com. And I am on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Forge Wealth. And on LinkedIn, I am Regina Mccann Hess. Have a great day. Bye.